Welcome to the show. My name is Kareem Kanji. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have an interesting conversation to bring to you. I have with me in studio the co-founder of a really interesting website and community.
Yes.
Called ActiveHistory.ca. I have with me Jay Young.
Hi, great to be here.
Thank you for coming by. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So co-founder of ActiveHistory.ca. This series that we put on, we talk a lot about social media, and we're going to get to that, but let's talk about, for those who don't know, what is ActiveHistory.ca?
Okay. So ActiveHistory.ca is a website that was founded 4 years ago, around this time of year, so 4th anniversary.
Happy birthday.
Thank you, thank you. No cake that I know of, but... and basically, it's a website that connects the work of historians with the wider public and the importance of the past to current events.
Okay.
So we do this mainly through a group blog. So about 4 days a week, we have a new article, essentially a new blog post that comes up from a writer, a community member, historian, any of the above, from across Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the writings are from our editors, such as myself. Some of the writings are from our contributors, who contribute about 4 times a year. And others come from guest posts, so just people that contact us saying they want to write something about history, or also someone that we've approached because they're doing something really interesting, or they have an event going on, or a new book coming out, or just some way in which they can add to the site. So we publish 4 blog posts a week on average, which essentially is a way of just making history accessible to the wider public, making history interesting to people today. And the online format is wonderful because it's not very expensive to make this project. It's fast. We are the publisher along with the creator, the content creator, and of course it's accessible in the sense that unlike a monograph, a book somewhere, it's online. You can read it on your smartphone, you can read it on your tablet, you can read it on your laptop. It's all around you. Nice.
Now let's go back 4 years. What was the genesis of ActiveHistory.ca? How did it get started, and
Sure.
to where you are today?
Sure. So Jim Clifford and Tom Peace, who are 2 of the other editors, along with myself, Ian Milligan, Christine McLaughlin, and Kristen McCracken, they created a conference about 5 years ago, I'd say, which was called Active History, which was held at Glendon College, sort of a satellite campus of York University in Toronto. And the whole topic of the conference was like the website. It was this idea of how do we connect academic historians, the research of academic history, with community members, activists, heritage proponents. The conference was amazingly successful. And going forward, Tom and Jim said, we could publish a typical academic monograph from all the collections of papers that we received, the people that presented from the conference, or we can try to do something a little bit different, which fits a lot more with the principles of the conference, which was making history accessible. This is about 5 years ago, when the blogosphere was a little bit of maybe a less populated place.
Sure.
I think the people I don't think blogs quite had the same degree of popularity, maybe with the mass public that they do
Everybody
today.
wasn't doing it.
Right, exactly, and including myself. Right?
Sure.
I had heard the word blog, but even 5 years ago didn't really know what it was about, and certainly didn't blog myself. So Jim and Tom got Ian, Christine, and myself onto the project. We were all grad students, PhD students at York University at the time, and we said, let's create a blog. Now, at first we thought we would just send an email out to all the academic historians in Canada, and we would say we want blog posts, send us your content, send us your conference papers, things like that.
Yeah.
And it didn't materialize. And I think one reason there was no bite. There was no bite.
And why was that?
I think a big reason is that for academic historians, their profession is based on publishing. That's how you receive tenure. That's how you create prestige for yourself. And so there really wasn't a huge incentive for a lot of academic historians at first to send us their material. And of course, we were a completely brand new website with no name to it, no brand to it.
Yeah.
So no one sent us anything. And so we quickly realized we had to start creating the content ourselves. And so for the 5 editors at the time, we said, all right, every Monday, one of us is going to write a post. And by getting content on the site, we were able to then use certain types of email systems through academia to get the word out that we were doing this, and it really became a snowball. So once we had a couple posts on there that generated some attention, that led to other people saying, "What are you doing here?" And eventually we started asking the contributors to fill in some other parts of this weekly schedule, and slowly it gained so much more momentum to where we are today, where we have probably about, I'd say, 15 contributors along with the editors, and guest posts coming in from all over Canada.
So getting on this weekly schedule and seeing the uptake in traffic and people sort of now seeing and visiting and reading. Where did you know that we've really got, this is not just some small little website that history wonks are going to read, but there's a lot of people really interested in this. At what time did that happen?
Right. Well, I think one key moment, and this certainly relates to social media, is when we realized we need to get a Twitter account. Okay. So again, this was probably about 3 years ago, so about a year after the site had been created. And similar to blogging, we were thinking the same thing about Twitter. What's Twitter? Again, it hadn't reached its popularity that it is now. Sure. And so we got a Twitter account, and it was through sending out tweets, and then of course following other people, organizations, and of course they would follow us, that started creating a lot more publicity for the website. We started noticing our numbers. Of course, we can see the statistics of people who read our website, which is a great thing about the blog format. We noticed that as soon as we started using Twitter and also Facebook, we have a Facebook page, ActiveHistory.ca. That was a way of getting the word out about what we were doing, especially outside of academia. Yeah. Because as academic historians, as grad students, we were part of that community. But to reach the wider public, which was really our aim, it was hard to actually get the message out, to get people to know about the site. And that's where Twitter and Facebook became so great. But in terms of, seeing the website really explode, I think it's hard to think of a specific moment, a specific blog post that really, lit the fire. But in the last couple of years, we've had newspapers such as the Globe and Mail who have noticed stories that we've posted. One of our contributors, Ian Mosby, who's a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Guelph, a great food historian, he wrote a post on this cookbook that he had found in a used bookstore, which was essentially a woman's from the dating back I think to the 1940s, going all the way to the 1980s. It was a Good Housekeeper's Manual, or some type of a very popular cookbook in which she had written special moments in her life on particular recipes. And Ian's argument was essentially, we need to think of cookbooks as important historical sources, like how we think of the Constitution and things like that. Sure. And the Globe and Mail thought this was an interesting post, which I think illustrated we were able to get the word out to organizations like the Globe and Mail. Yeah. And they contacted Ian, and it was republished with a couple tweets in the Globe and Mail full-page spread. Nice. We've also had some other posts that have also been reprinted by other organizations, and so that, and along with just the more content you create on a blog like this, the more it becomes Google searchable. Yeah. And so now we notice that it's a variety of search terms based on any person has some type of historical question. If we have content about that question, chances are they're going to find it, right? Yeah. Which was a big aim of our site. So I wouldn't say there's really a specific moment, but sort of over time, it really, as I said, a snowball thing. It just accumulates momentum, and hopefully will into the future. And do you look at it and go, what have we done here? This is... Does it take up a lot of your time? I'm very curious about that, because this is a side project. So. Right, exactly. So, I finished my PhD at York last year, and since then I've been working full-time 9-to-5 office job. I'll be entering academia again in June with a postdoc at Mac, but really for the last year, for me, it's been I guess a hobby would be the wrong word, but almost community service is the way that I think of it. Because I think what we're doing is important stuff in terms of the community. So it's really, I would say it takes up maybe 4 or 5 hours of my week, getting home around 6 o'clock, spend an hour and a half on it before dinner. Yeah. And as an editor, my main role is to get the word out for the website. I'm also the public outreach coordinator. So when people contact us through our info at ActiveHistory.ca email account, I get the email and I'm always happy to correspond with people. But also, being an editor, I'm the one who kind of helps suggest a couple more maybe angles or some grammatical things in terms of our contributors' posts.
Yeah.
And then we actually are usually the ones who actually physically do the uploading of the posts onto the website. So that takes up a lot of time. And then, of course, I myself am responsible for writing the post load every 2 months. So that usually takes up about a day. And I'm always constantly thinking, I've got this post I've got to write in the next 2 months. What's a historical issue that's in the news, or what's something that I've read that is going to be that next post. So for me, not being in academia but now entering it again, it's been a great way for me to keep one foot in academia, because we do have a large following within the university crowd. But on the other hand, it's been a great way for me to stay interested in history, but to really engage with various communities as myself, not being an academic within the last year.
This has become now, I'm assuming, a source.
Right.
ActiveHistory.ca is probably being cited.
Right. We can kind of tell when students are trying to plagiarize from our papers or when TAs and professors have detected plagiarism in their search term as a long quote, which is often a technique of how you can try to guess if someone's been plagiarizing. So, I guess that's somewhat of a negative example, but in general, it's showing that university students are using it as a resource. As a TA, you certainly realize that most students do research on the web and not in libraries, and for most people today, research is mainly a web activity.
It is.
And so again, it's translating these monographs, which unfortunately can be dusty in some cases, getting that research onto the web, where again it can be accessible to certainly younger generations. That's for sure.
That's interesting. Yeah. You were talking about you started as a co-founder. You're now one of the editors. You contribute every couple of months. Public outreach as well. What's your role with, or is there a role with the future of ActiveHistory.ca, or is it let's keep this community based. Let's really continue to create a resource. I'm curious about that.
So, I guess the one thing about Active History is that it's, as you said, it's basically volunteer labor, right? All the editors are either finishing PhDs, or two of them are tenure track professors. 2 of us are now going to be postdocs, and another one is an archivist in Sault Ste. Marie. So we all have jobs of which this is sort of part of it, but not specifically. So on the one hand, it is volunteer work, and on the other hand, it is we see it as a professional commitment on our part.
Interesting.
Going forward, I never really even would have assumed that it was for sure that the website would have been as successful as it is. So, it's hard to kind of see where it could go, but I think one thing is eventually to have someone who is able to devote more of their time, whether it's some type of a semi-paid position, for them to basically, in terms of the outreach, know there's a particular topic that's going to be in the news. Say we have a federal election coming out. To be someone who can email experts across the country, historical experts, email academic historians who have done research on federal elections in the past and things like that, and to have a lot more of a full commitment on having outreach to people who could contribute to the website but don't as of yet, because of maybe they don't know about the website or time commitments. But I think we've built up enough of a legitimacy, enough of a name over the last 4 years that people now across the kind of Canadian historical community know what Active History is, and they would probably be a lot more interested in writing for us. So I think going into the future, we're sort of at a position right now where it's more when people contact us wanting to write for the site.
Interesting.
In the future, if we could have someone who could have a little bit more time to really devote their main attention to the site, that would be the number one thing I think to see the site going forward. But on the other hand, we now have we've always had a podcast section where we record talks, lectures from across Canada, but for the last year or so, we've had the History Slam podcast. So
interesting.
Essentially, one of our readers, Sean Graham, who's a PhD student at the University of Ottawa, contacted us, said, "Hey, I'd like to start a regular podcast for you guys." Okay. And so that's awesome. We want new content on here. This sounds interesting. So there's a case where a reader, a member of our community, contacted us with a new idea, pitched us with an idea, and was the one who'd want to do all the work for it. So we said, sure, that's awesome. So in the future, again, I hope as the message spreads of the website, more and more people can hopefully pitch ideas to us about different things they'd like to see on the website, and of course, if they can be the ones who help us with it, that's even better.
Do you see Active History as going the path of sort of like a Wikipedia, where it's community engaged in terms of the community provides the content that allows the wider community access to information,
right.
Or do you see going the way of something like maybe a Huffington Post,
right.
whereby there's a lot of great content on it that's very engaging, that maybe there's a business model there.
Right.
I'm curious if you guys have had that conversation.
The business model question is interesting, and I mean, when it comes to hoping to have someone who could be at least part-time paid to work on the site, to devote more energy to it, I mean, obviously there's going to have to be money there somehow.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think the strategy for that would be through some kind of a funding thing. So
sure.
I'm not sure if something like advertising is really what we want to get into. And I mean, at current time, I don't know if our readership's about 15,000 individual readers a month. I'm not sure if it's even high enough at the moment to really get a lot of revenue from that source. So really where I could see income coming in, it would be through funding through government organization or an NGO, something like that, where we'd be partnering with an organization. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, though, I think what's great about the site is that it does run on a pretty shoestring budget.
Yeah.
And that it does have this sort of volunteer community engagement side to it. So I mean, I think in terms of the fact that we do have, unlike Wikipedia, on our posts, there's an author. And which makes it, I think, a lot more like the Huffington Post. We essentially have columnists. Our contributors are essentially columnists.
Yeah.
And then, we're always looking for other people to contribute guest posts, which seems a little bit more like the Huffington Post model. Versus the Wikipedia, which is really, modeled on the idea of it being objective encyclopedic knowledge.
Yeah.
We're sort of a mix. We're certainly, I wrote a post a couple months ago inspired by the recent changes to old age security by the federal government. So, I was looking for a post to write. I thought there aren't really a lot of great accessible things on the history of old age security in Canada, but it's an important topic for all of us. We're going to hopefully retire at some point in time. We're going to learn about it. So, I mean, that article that I wrote was a lot more of an almost encyclopedic entry into just understanding the history of old age security. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, we do get posts that are almost more of a polemic variety, much more of an opinion piece.
Okay.
And so I think Active History would always I always see us straddling the two. Literally getting history on the internet, getting good researched, short articles on the internet that just teach people about a particular topic. But on the other hand, being a forum for people to talk, people to discuss important historical issues, heritage issues, to ask themselves where the study of history is going today in Canada.
Mm-hmm. I've got this Facebook page out. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but there's a lot of people. I mean, they got over 4.5 million fans.
Yeah.
But I effing love science. On Facebook is one of my favorite things to read. Mm-hmm. It shows up in my newsfeed, and it's always really, really interesting content. And it's amazing. In the past, maybe it's because of the space I'm in. I'm really interested in science, or at least it's the curiosity of it. I'm curious if you have found very similar things with Active History on Facebook in terms of the type of content that you're sharing and just the amazement that you see is that, wow, we're getting people that I never thought would read this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's...
I wonder if you maybe need to change the Facebook page to
Getting an expletive always gets a higher readership, right? I mean the Facebook page, which is really just a way of getting people to the website, which I guess makes it a little bit different than the science Facebook, where Facebook is
where it is,
right?
Yeah,
makes it a little bit different. I mean, I guess where I really get a sense of our readers is when people contact me as the public outreach coordinator, asking to repost a blog. We recently had a post on CEDA, is essentially our federal government foreign investment development agency is essentially being reduced and merged into the Department of Defense, and so
CEDA with the Department of Defense.
Exactly. So,
that's an interesting post, historical or not.
Right. And we had an email email from a PhD student at Waterloo who's studying Canadian foreign policy in the 1950s and 1960s, I believe is her dissertation.
Wow.
Said I'd love to write a post for you because my research right now is relevant with an issue that's definitely in the news. And so of course we said, sure, this is wonderful, please. And then another individual who has a development website sent us an email saying we'd love to repost. So it's these reposting things where we often get a good idea of who's reading our blog. Canadian Encyclopedia, we've recently had building a really great relationship with them where, I mean, they're almost a bit more that Wikipedia model of Canadian history.
Sure.
And of course, they're looking for more content, and we're always looking to form partnerships. We got an email from one of their employees asking us if they could repost a column that we had published on the death of Stomp and Tom Connors. Okay. So Caitlin Wainwright, one of our contributors when Stomp and Tom died, sort of wrote a very engaging piece saying, the media has kind of overlooked, they've celebrated him as somebody who celebrates Canada, but in fact he also had a critical side in terms of his work with Canada. And we got an email from Canadian Encyclopedia saying we'd love to repost this. So I mean that's where I really get an amazement is all the different people who contact us wanting to repost
all the different types of people. Yeah, absolutely.
And because we're Creative Commons, as long as a blog gives or any organization says this was originally published on ActiveHistory.ca, and as long as they're not making any money directly from it, we're more than happy to have anyone repost our blogs, which again hits at the accessibility idea that we're, whether it's on our site or whether it originated with our site, ActiveHistory.ca, we're just happy to get the writings out there in any way we can.
Nice. Did you think, looking back 4 years, that this is what it would become, or did you think this would sort of be, the people who attended that conference 5 years ago, that, this would be their resource that they could go to?
Well, I mean, one hand, I have to admit that I didn't know if it was going to last longer than a year, right? I mean, when we sent that call out and we didn't get any responses, and it wasn't until we sort of realized we got to do this ourselves, and I mean, at the same time, we were all pretty busy trying to finish our dissertations. So, I mean, on the one hand, I'm just happy it's around it all. But the fact that it has grown so much in terms of readership, in terms of our contributor base, our guest post base, I'm really so proud of that. But on the other hand, I mean, I think there is a yearning for history out there. I mean, it really is amazing when a couple of those posts just, they just hit the moment, the cultural moment, and they go. I mean, I don't know if viral is the right term. We're not looking at hundreds of thousands of hits.
They're engaging and they're topical.
Exactly, right? Exactly. And so, I mean, when you start seeing a post get 1,000 views in one day because it has been retweeted and it has been, other people are telling other people about the post. It's really quite amazing, and that's what we're aiming for here at the site. So.
You obviously take a look at the analytics on the site to see where people are coming from, how many hits, how many uniques you're getting, and what terms people are using to come upon your website. On the social side, what role has that played in both the overall success of ActiveHistory.ca, and if you're able to really tell us, the more on the micro level in terms of how do you see people using social and then ending up at your website? Right.
Well, I mean, the power of the retweet, is really the most amazing, one of the most amazing things in terms of the social media side. And of course, I mean, we can see how many people have retweeted our original tweet from ActiveHistory.ca Twitter account, which is @ActiveHist. Okay. And so, I mean, you see that there, and that it just spreads like wildfire. I mean, social media really was our way of getting the word out because, and this gets back to your earlier question about where do you see this today versus 4 years ago. Yeah. The challenge wasn't even really to get our message out to the academic community because we were all a part of the academic community, the Canadian historical community. The real challenge was getting it out to the wider public, and at the same time, that was really the aim of the site. And if it wasn't for Facebook, if it wasn't for Twitter, it would be so much harder, if not impossible, especially we don't have money for advertising, things like that, to just let people know this site exists. Yeah. And it's through people following us on Twitter, and then people who don't know of us, knowing of us because of a retweet from someone that they follow, that people get to know the site. And so, I mean, it really is, as I said, the power of the retweet, that network synergy that social media creates, and that's what's allowed us to get that exposure into the wider public, along with things like Google searches as well. But of course, the more people that get to our site through things like Twitter, the higher we are in the Google rankings as well in terms of search terms. So it all works together, I think.
Nice. I'm sure someone will, if it hasn't already, write an article on the history of social media.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, in social media itself,
it's so young.
You know, it's so young. At the same time, you know, it's also connected to the most intimate part of being human, which is to communicate.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, in television, you know, Speaker's Corner has some elements that remind me of social media, right?
Yeah,
the difference is, I guess, now it's in terms of the gatekeeper, right? The user is the gatekeeper, compared to something like City TV.
True. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. You know, as we end up, how can people connect both with you and with the wider Active History community? Right.
So, I mean, the website, of course, is the most obvious thing. It's www.activehistory.ca. And there you'll see our posts, our papers, our book reviews, podcasts. And then there's also a contact tab. And that leads you to our email account, which is info@activehistory.ca. And that will go straight to me. And of course, also our Twitter account it's @ActiveHist. So, I mean, check out the website, follow us on Twitter, and that would be the great way to be a part of this really cool community.
Thank you so much, Jay.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for joining us. Again, my name is Kareem Kanji. Check us out online, thirdocean.com, and you can also follow us on Twitter @WeAreThirdOcean. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to talking with you soon. Bye-bye.